Told you about a case Tuesday that ended in police officer being shot in friendly fire and a suspect killed by police. It all began from what DMPD says was a violation of a protective order. But as Local 5's Lara Bowen has uncovered, the suspect may not have even been aware of the order. Lara, why is that?
Well, court records show that a temporary protective order related to domestic abuse had been filed against a suspect, Weston Derby, around 4 p.m. the afternoon prior. However, court records show that that order never got to Derby. For context, I talked to Drake University law professor to better understand how protective orders work. According to Drake law professor Sally Frank, in order for a temporary protective order to be filed, a judge must find the story credible enough to go to trial. The case will then be taken to trial, where both sides are heard to determine whether or not a final protective order is appropriate, though both a temporary and final order can provide certain enforceable protections.
Not to go near the victim, not to go near the victim's home, not to go near the victim's work, not to communicate with the victim themselves or through third parties except through the attorneys.
However, there would be a catch. If the defendant doesn't know about the order or couldn't receive it, it can't be enforced, which is why Frank says it's so important for those papers to get to the alleged offender.
The sheriffs try to do it right away, within a day.
And there's a reason the protocol is to serve the order in person. Frank says officials need to have evidence that the alleged offender knows about the order.
People have different emails. They don't look at their email. You do want the person to actually know.
If the defendant makes contact with the victim after a protective order is filed, but before the order was delivered, authorities can serve the papers right then and there.
They might arrest them on something else, right? If they broke into a house, they'll arrest them on burglary and hand them the order. But if they're just at the doorstep and the only violation is of the no contact order, they'll probably serve the person the no contact order and tell them to get away.
Frank says while protective orders do work with many domestic abuse cases, they're not effective against all abusers.
But if somebody's intent on killing someone, the extra 6 months on top of life without parole is not going to be much of an inhibitor.
Frank says amid all these legal precautions, sometimes it's still on the victim to be in charge of their own safety. Sometimes victims have to flee or turn to neighbors to keep an eye out for their abusers or reach out to local domestic violence organizations.